Teachboe duos eflam didinal bior n. There were three things every child in the kingdom of Valedria was expected to possess: a family name, mark, and a flame. The first was inherited. The second was awakened. The third was supposed to prove that you were worthy of both. For centuries, the noble houses of Valedria had built their power around dragons. Some families were known for thunder dragons. Others controlled beasts of ice, crimson fire, poisonous mist, or even creatures that could swallow light itself. But House Vera stood above them all. Bloodline was called the House of the Crimson Sun. According to ancient records, the founder of House Vera had once ridden a dragon whose scales were brighter than molten gold, had descended from the heavens during an ancient war, and chosen the Vera bloodline as its human partner. Since that day, every Vera child had undergone the same awakening ceremony at the age of 16. They stood before the sunstone. They placed one hand against the ancient crystal. Then they awakened the dragon flame sleeping inside their blood. The stronger the flame, the greater the child's future. And on the morning Kale Vera turned 16, everyone gathered to witness his awakening. The grand hall of House Vera was filled with nobles. Hundreds of people stood beneath enormous banners bearing the crest of a golden dragon wrapped around a red sun. At the center of the hall stood Kale's older sister, Seraphine. She had awakened 3 years earlier. A brilliant crimson flame had erupted from her body and formed the silhouette of a majestic winged dragon. She had reached the 7th tier immediately. At 17, she was already considered one of the greatest young dragon wielders in Valedria. Her younger brother was expected to follow in her footsteps. Darius Vera, their father, stood beside the sunstone with his hands folded behind his back. His expression was calm, but his eyes were cold. Come forward, Kale. Kale walked toward the crystal. He could feel hundreds of eyes following him. Some were hopeful. Some were curious. Were already mocking him. His sister smiled faintly. Don't be nervous, Seraphine whispered. Just breathe. Kale nodded. He placed his hand against the sunstone. Nothing happened. The hall became silent. Kale waited. 5 seconds. 10, 20. Still nothing. Then the sunstone flickered. A tiny silver line appeared across its surface. A murmur spread through the crowd. Cal's father narrowed his eyes. Kale pressed harder. The crystal remained silent. No fire, no dragon, no roar, nothing. One of the elders whispered, impossible. Another said, perhaps the boy has no dragon blood. A third laughed. How embarrassing. Kale lowered his hand. He looked at his father. Father. Lord Darius did not answer. Instead, he walked toward the sunstone and placed his palm on it. Crystal immediately responded. A violent crimson light exploded through the hall. Silence. The single word from Lord Darius stopped the murmuring. He stared at Kyle. You have failed. Kale swallowed. Perhaps the ritual was damaged. We can try again. No. His father turned away. Father, please. Lord Darius stopped. You are 16 years old. Every member of our family has awakened by this age. I know. Your sister awakened at 13. I know. Your cousins awakened before their 15th birthdays. Kale's fists tightened. I know, for Lord Darius looked at him. For the Vera name, this is unacceptable. The words struck harder than any physical blow. Kale had spent years imagining this day. He had practiced swordsmanship until his hands bled. He had studied dragon histories. He had memorized the names of ancient beasts. He had believed that once the dragon within him awakened, his father would finally look at him with pride. Instead, he saw disappointment. Seraphine stepped forward. Father, perhaps Kale needs more time. Lord Darius ignored her. An elder approached him and whispered something into his ear. Lord Darius's expression changed. He looked at Kale again. This time, something darker appeared in his eyes. Perhaps there is one use for him. Kale frowned. What do you mean? His father did not explain. That evening, Kale was ordered to pack. He thought he was being sent away temporarily. He was wrong. By midnight, he was standing outside the northern gates of Valedria. 3 guards surrounded him. Behind them waited a black carriage. Kyle looked at his father. Where are we going? The Lord Darius stood beneath the moonlight. To the Hollow Vale. Kale's heart stopped. Everyone knew the Hollow Vale. It was a forbidden region where dragon hunters refused to travel. Ancient dragons were said to sleep beneath its mountains. Some returned from the Vale. Why are you sending me there? Lord Darius remained silent. Cale's voice trembled. Father. Finally, Darius answered, because your existence has become a political problem. Cale stared at him. What? You cannot inherit this house. You cannot become a dragon knight. You cannot strengthen our alliances. Yet your bloodline makes you valuable to people who believe you possess something the rest of us cannot see. Cale shook his head. You don't need to. His father turned away. Take him. Cale resisted. Wait. The guards grabbed him. Father. He looked towards Seraphine. She had followed them outside. She stood frozen near the gates. Cale desperately searched her face for help. She took one step forward, then stopped. Her eyes were wet. I'm sorry. That was all she said. The carriage doors closed, began moving. Cale pounded against the wooden wall. You can't do this! But the estate became smaller behind him. The great Vera mansion disappeared into the darkness. And as the carriage climbed toward the mountains, Cale noticed something strange. The silver line he had seen on the sunstone was still glowing beneath his skin. It was not a flame. It was a symbol shaped like a broken dragon wing. Cale touched it. For the first time that night, he heard a voice. Not from outside, from inside his mind, old as the mountains. They have finally sent you to me. Cale froze. Then the voice whispered one more sentence. Now we can begin. The ceremony did not end when Cale left the grand hall. For the nobles, his failure became the evening's favorite subject. In private rooms, they repeated the same cruel jokes. Some wondered whether his mother had hidden another man's child in the Vera household. Others suggested that Cale's lack of flame was a sign of a curse. Cale heard pieces of those conversations while servants packed his belongings. Not one person asked how he felt. They asked whether the family could hide the embarrassment before visiting nobles returned to their homes. In his room, Cale opened the wooden chest where he kept the few things his mother had given him before she died. There was a faded blue scarf, an old book of dragon legends, and a small bronze pendant shaped like a feather. He had always believed his mother had been ordinary compared with the rest of the Vera family. Now, looking back, he remembered one strange thing she used to say whenever he asked about dragons. Never be afraid if yours is different. At the time, he had thought she meant he might have an unusual flame. Now the memory felt like a warning. Before leaving the estate, Cale passed the training yard. The other young members of the family were practicing with their dragons. Crimson fire crossed the night sky. Children laughed when their beasts landed beside them. Cale stopped. A young cousin named Ren looked at him. You're really going to the Hollow Vale? Cale nodded. Ren's smile disappeared. Don't go. Cale looked surprised. Why? Because my father says no Vera who enters there comes back. Cale thanked him. The boy lowered his voice. I don't think you're useless. It was the kindest thing anyone had said that day. Cale carried those words with him into the carriage. Long after the Vera estate disappeared, he opened his mother's old book. Several pages had been torn out. One sentence remained beneath the picture of a silver dragon. When the flame refuses to appear, for the shadow behind the sun. Cale traced the words. He did not understand them. Not yet. The moment the carriage crossed into the northern mountains, the silver mark on his chest became warm. And somewhere beneath the earth, something answered. Parched to Haladello Valley, the carriage stopped before sunrise. Cale opened his eyes. The guards had already left. The carriage door stood open. Cold wind rushed inside. Cale stepped out. There was no road behind him. The mountain path ended at the edge of a gigantic valley. Black cliffs surrounded it on every side. Mist rolled across the ground. The trees were twisted and pale. In the distance, Cale could see enormous bones scattered across the mountainside. Dragon bones. Some were larger than houses. He understood immediately. His father had not sent him somewhere dangerous. He had sent him somewhere people disappeared. Cale turned around. The carriage was already gone. For several minutes, he simply stood there. Then he laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound of someone who had finally understood how completely he had been abandoned. Fine. He wiped his eyes. If this is where I die, then I won't die begging. He walked into the hollow vale. For 3 days, Kale survived on the little food hidden in his bag. Vale was worse than every story he had heard. At night, things moved between the trees. During the day, enormous winged creatures circled above the cliffs. Some had no eyes. Others had multiple heads. Kale avoided them. He hunted small animals. He gathered water from streams. He slept beneath rocks. But on the 4th night, his luck ended. A beast found him. It looked like a wolf, twice the size of a horse. Its body was covered in black scales. Smoke came from its mouth. Kale grabbed his sword. The beast charged. Its claws shattered the stone where his head had been. Kale struck its neck. His sword broke. The creature turned. Kale froze. The silver symbol beneath his skin burned. A wave of darkness erupted from his chest. The beast stopped. It stared at Kale. Then it lowered its head. Kale could not breathe. What are you? The beast answered. Not with words, with fear. For some reason, the creature was terrified of him. Kale slowly approached. The beast backed away, then something roared from the mountains. The black-scaled creature fled. Kale looked upward. A massive shadow passed across the moon. A dragon. But unlike the dragons of Valedria, this one did not descend. It watched him from the clouds, then disappeared. Kale remained in the clearing. The ancient voice returned. Your blood is not empty. The question you should ask is what is inside you. Kale gripped his chest. I don't have a dragon. You do. You were never meant to awaken an ordinary dragon. Kale stared into the darkness. What does that mean? The voice fell silent. Then, somewhere deep beneath the valley, something answered with a tremendous roar. The ground shook. A crack appeared in the ground. A faint golden light rose from it. Kyle approached. At the bottom of the fissure, he found a staircase. It descended into the earth. Thousands of symbols carved into the walls. All of them depicted dragons. But these dragons were not fighting. They were kneeling. Kale walked downward. The staircase continued for what felt like hours. Finally, it opened into a massive underground chamber. The center stood a stone throne. Something was chained to it. Kale stopped. The creature was enormous. Its body was covered in pale blue scales. Its wings were folded around itself. Its eyes were closed. 7 gigantic chains passed through its body. Kale whispered, a dragon. The dragon opened its eyes. They were silver. The ancient voice inside Kale suddenly became louder. That is not a dragon. Kale frowned. That is the last one who remembers the truth? The creature lifted its head. Human. Its voice shook the chamber. Kale stepped backward. The dragon stared directly at him. Why have they sent you? I was abandoned. The dragon remained silent. Then it laughed. The sound was so deep that dust fell from the ceiling. Of course. Kale's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? They always sacrifice the one they fear. The dragon examined the silver mark on Kyle's chest. Its expression changed. Kale moved closer. What? The dragon whispered. The mark of the eclipse. Kale touched the symbol. What is it? The dragon's eyes filled with something Kale had never seen in the face of a creature that powerful. Fear. That mark belongs to the first dragon. Kale stared at him. The first dragon? Not the first one born. The creature leaned forward. The first one who rebelled. The first week in the hollow veil taught Kale that courage was not the absence of fear, the decision to keep moving while fear followed every step. He learned the habits of the valley. Pale birds never landed near pools where the water reflected moonlight. The 3-headed predators hunted only after midnight. And whenever the wind suddenly stopped, Kale hid because something much larger was usually nearby. He began marking safe paths with small cuts in the bark. On the 8th day, he discovered an abandoned stone shelter. Inside was a rusted cooking pot, a broken spear, and the remains of a campfire. Someone had survived here once. Kale found a name carved into the wall, Aaron Vale. Beside it were 5 dates. The last date was 40 years old. Kale wondered how many people had entered the hollow vale believing they could conquer it. That night, he dreamed of the silver dragon from the sky. Creature stood before him in a field of stars. Why did you come? It asked. Kale answered honestly. I was sent here because my family thought I was worthless. The dragon stared at him. Then you came for the wrong reason. What reason should I have? To discover whether they were right. Akale woke before sunrise. The dream stayed with him. For the first time, he considered that proving his family wrong could become another kind of chain. He did not want to spend the rest of his life trying to make people regret abandoning him. He wanted to know why the mark existed, know why the valley reacted to him. And he wanted to decide his own future. That morning, when the black, scaled beast appeared again at the edge of the trees, Kale did not attack. He lowered his broken sword. The creature stared at him. Kale slowly placed a piece of meat on the ground. The beast approached. It took the food. Then it disappeared. Kale smiled. He had survived another night without killing anything. The lesson was small, but it mattered. Hollow Veil was teaching him that strength did not always mean destruction. Sometimes it meant restraint. 3. THEMENBNATHMONTAN Kale turned. Creatures emerged from the darkness. They were not dragons. They were dragon-born soldiers. Armor was made from black scales. Their helmets bore the symbol of a red crown. At their front stood a tall woman with silver hair. Her mask. Kyle recognized her. Lady Morel Vera, his father's younger sister, his aunt. You, Kale whispered. Morel smiled. We wondered how long it would take you to find this place. Akale stepped backward. You knew? We all knew. She looked at the chained dragon. Fathered what was necessary? You sent me here to die? Knew. Morel's smile faded. Sent you here to wake him. Kale stared at her. The dragon pulled against its chains. The mountains shook. Why? Morel walked closer. Because the Crimson Sun bloodline is dying. She pointed toward Kyle. And you are the key to replacing it. Kale shook his head. Understand. You were never powerless. Morel laughed softly. You were sealed. The silver mark on Kale's chest burned. The day you were born. She continued. The sunstone reacted violently. Your mother knew what it meant. So did your father. You did not possess the spirit of a normal dragon. What did I possess? Morel looked at the chained creature. The eclipse. Akale felt the room grow colder. The power to command dragons. Morel shook her head. The power to break them. With the dragon's eyes opened wider, Kyle realized something. His entire life had been based on a lie. Everyone had believed he was weak because the sunstone had shown nothing. But it had not shown nothing. It had been unable to measure him. Morel raised her hand. The soldiers surrounded Kale. Come with us. Kale looked at the dragon. What happens to him? Morel smiled. We will use him. The dragon snarled. Kyle's blood boiled. He remembered his father's face. He remembered his sister. He remembered every person who had called him useless. Then he remembered the dragon's words. The one who remembers the truth. No. Morel frowned. What did you say? Kale's eyes glowed silver. I said no. The chamber became silent. One of the soldiers rushed forward. Kyle raised his hand. Soldier's dragon armor shattered. The creature beneath it screamed. All of the dragons carved into the chamber walls began glowing, but I stumbled backward. Impossible. Kale's mark spread across his chest. Silver light traveled through his veins. The chained dragon lifted its head. Finally, Kale felt something enormous waking inside him. It was not a flame. It was cold. A wind. Darkness filled with stars. A gigantic dragon silhouette appeared behind him. Its wings extended across the chamber. Morel fell to her knees. The eclipsed dragon. The shadow opened its mouth. But before it could attack, the chained dragon shouted. Wait! The shadow disappeared. Why? The dragon looked at him. Because power without knowledge will destroy you. The Kale stared. Teach me. For the first time, the ancient creature smiled. Your name? Kale? Kale Vera. The dragon lowered its head. My name is Orlith. Kale looked at the chains. How do I free you? You do not? Why? Because I am not your enemy. He looked at the soldiers. Then who is? Orlith's eyes moved toward the ceiling. The dragon crown? Kale had heard the name. Every noble in Valedria wanted the dragon crown. It was an ancient artifact said to unite every dragon under one command. Kale had always thought it was merely a legend. Orlith shook his head. It is real. Myrelle rose slowly, and it belongs to House Vera. Kale looked at her. Orlith continued, your family intends to place the crown upon your sister's head. Seraphine. Yes? Why? Because she possesses the Crimson Sun. And what does that have to do with me? Orlith stared directly at him. Your eclipse is the only power capable of controlling the crown. Kale finally understood. His father had not abandoned him because he was useless. He had abandoned him because he needed Kale to activate the power hidden beneath the hollow veil. He needed Kale alive, only until he had served his purpose. Kale looked at Myrelle. You planned everything. She smiled. Your family always plans everything. Kale raised his hand. The soldier stepped backward. Then Orlith spoke. Go. Kale looked at him. Go back to Valedria. Why? Because the dragon crown ceremony begins in 20 days. Orlith's eyes became hard. And when it begins, your family will stop being your greatest problem. He paused. They will become the first servants of something much older. Beth Myrelle ordered her soldiers to seal the chamber. But the moment they tried, ancient symbols on the walls flared. Their weapons became useless. One soldier struck the floor and watched his blade crumble into dust, laughed. The mountain remembers. Myrelle looked furious. You old creature. You should have died centuries ago. Orlith answered calmly. So should your family's lies. Kale felt the words settle over him. Finally revealed the history Lord Darius had hidden. When Kale was born, a storm of silver lightning had surrounded the Vera estate. The sunstone had cracked from top to bottom. 3 family elders died when they tried to suppress its reaction. Kale's mother had begged Darius not to seal the child. Darius had refused. He feared that if Kale's power awakened naturally, it would expose the truth about the Vera bloodline. So they used an ancient seal. The seal worked, but only partially. It stopped Kale from producing ordinary dragon flame. It could not erase the eclipse. For years, the power remained dormant. Until the Sunstone ceremony, Kale realized why the silver line had appeared that day. The old seal had finally cracked. Myrelle attempted to activate a second seal. Kale stopped her. He did not know exactly how the eclipse worked, but his instincts told him the spell was built around fear. So he did not resist. He allowed the magic to touch him. Then he removed the fear from it. The spell collapsed. Myrelle stared at him. That shouldn't be possible. Kale answered, maybe that's why you were afraid of me. The soldiers fled. Myrelle remained behind. For a moment, proud. Then the expression vanished. Your father will destroy you? Kale shook his head. He already tried. Myrelle disappeared into the darkness. Kale turned toward Orlith. Her? Why didn't you let me kill her? Because some enemies are more useful alive. Kale frowned. Because they still believe the lie? Orlith looked toward the passage. And people who believe a lie will eventually reveal who created it. Part 4. 10 years, Enthedpl did not return to Valedria. Not immediately. Orlith convinced him that returning before he understood the eclipse would only result in his death. So Kyle remained beneath the mountain. Months became years. Years became a decade. Orlith taught him everything. The eclipse was not a normal dragon power. It had been created long before the current kingdoms existed. It could silence magical bonds, sever dragon commands. It could erase spells. And most dangerously, it could awaken ancient dragons that had been sleeping for centuries. Power came with a price. Every time Kale used it, he experienced the memories of the dragons he touched. At first, he hated it. He would awaken after battle remembering the death of a dragon thousands of years ago. He would feel its fear, its anger, its loneliness. Then, slowly, he understood. Dragons were not beasts. They had been enslaved. The noble houses of Valedria had created their empire by binding dragons to human bloodlines. The dragon crown was not a symbol of unity. It was a weapon. It allowed one person to control every bonded dragon in the kingdom, and Kale's family planned to use it to rule forever. During those 10 years, Kale also met another creature. A small dragon. She was born with no scales. Her body was covered in midnight blue feathers. Her eyes were bright silver. Orlith found her wounded near the underground river. Kale cared for her. He named her Lyra. As she grew, something strange happened. She bonded with Kale without a ritual, not through magic, through trust. Unlike the dragons of noble houses, Lyra could speak directly into his mind. Kale laughed. That obvious? Very. You are not exactly subtle either. I am a dragon. We are naturally impressive. Kale smiled. First real smile he had given in years. He trained with Lyra. They fought together. They explored forgotten tunnels. Eventually, Kale discovered an ancient room beneath Orlith's chamber. Inside was a mural. It showed a man standing before 7 dragons. Looked exactly like Kale. Orlith saw the mural and became silent. I was afraid of this. What does it mean? Orlith stared at the image. It means the eclipse did not choose you. Kale frowned. Then what? You are its descendant. Kale stepped closer. The mural contained an inscription. He translated it slowly. When the crown commands the sky, shall sever the chain. Kale looked at Orlith. The last ember. Orlith nodded. That is what your ancestors called themselves. Why did they disappear? Because they lost. Kale clenched his fists. Then I will finish what they started. Orlith shook his head. Will make you predictable. I don't want revenge. Orlith smiled. Good. Kale looked toward the surface. The first time in 10 years, he could feel the wind from the world above. What happened to my sister? Orlith's expression darkened. He became the strongest dragon knight in Veledria. Kale's heart tightened. My father. Lord Darius controls the kingdom's western armies. And Seraphine. Orlith hesitated. She is no longer free. Kale looked sharply at him. That mean. The dragon crown ceremony is not about crowning her. He turned toward the entrance. It is about sacrificing her. Kale's expression hardened. Then I am going back. Lyra spread her wings. I am coming too. Kale smiled. I was hoping you would say that. Orlith opened the mountain gate. Then go. Kale stopped. You cannot come with me. Orlith looked at the chains around his body. Not yet. Why? Because someone must remain behind. He looked at Kale. Your battle is beginning. Kale stepped into the daylight. The boy who had entered the hollow vale at 16 was gone. In his place stood a man with silver eyes, a black sword, and a dragon beside him. 10 years after his family abandoned him, Kale Vera was returning home. Training under Orlith was not heroic. It was painful. Kale spent months learning how to control the eclipse without allowing it to consume his emotions. If he became angry, the power multiplied. If he became afraid, the shadows became harder to control. Orlith forced him to meditate beside underground rivers. He made Kale sit for hours while dragons flew above him, including me. He taught him to recognize the difference between a dragon obeying because it was frightened and a dragon obeying because it trusted him. The difference was invisible to ordinary people. Kale learned to feel it. During one training session, Orlith ordered Lyra to attack him. Kale refused. She is my friend. Then you are not ready. Orlith attacked Kale himself. The blow sent him across the chamber. Kale stood again. You could kill me. Wes. Then why don't you? Because I am teaching you something. Oh, Orlith raised one claw. Power gives you the ability to hurt someone. Character gives you the ability not to. Kale remembered those words whenever his anger returned. 10 years changed him, but they did not erase the loneliness of his childhood. There were nights when he still dreamed about the Vera estate. Sometimes he saw Seraphine standing at the gates. Sometimes he saw himself begging his father to let him stay. Sometimes he woke furious. Lyra noticed. One morning she asked, do you hate them? Kale thought for a long time. Do you want them to suffer? I used to. What changed? Kale looked at the sunrise entering the cavern. I realized that if I spend my life wishing they suffer, they still own my life. Lyra nodded as if she understood. I don't want to belong to them anymore. That was the real moment Kale became free. Not when his power awakened. Not when he mastered the eclipse. Stopped measuring his worth against the people who had rejected him. Part 5. THCIT Hetfargot if I am Veledria had changed. The city walls were taller. The streets were wider. The Vera banners were everywhere. Kyle walked through the eastern gate wearing a simple black coat. No one recognized him. That was exactly what he wanted. Lyra remained hidden beneath a traveling cloak. Her wings were tucked tightly against her body. How do you feel? Kale asked. Hungry. Kale laughed. Some things never change. They entered a small inn. Kale listened. The people were talking about the upcoming dragon crown ceremony. Everyone worshipped Seraphine. She was now known as the Crimson Valkyrie. She had defeated countless enemies. She had become the kingdom's strongest young knight. But there were rumors. Rumors that she had become ill. Rumors that she slept for days without waking. Rumors that her dragon sometimes appeared without being summoned. Kale heard something that made his blood run cold. The crown will choose its vessel. An old man whispered. Say that too loudly. Another replied. What? The crown doesn't choose. The council chooses. The Kale listened carefully. The old man shook his head. You are still too young to understand. The council stopped ruling years ago. Then who rules? The old man looked toward the Vera banners outside the window, the thing beneath the palace. Kale froze. Lyra's voice entered his mind. I don't like this city. Neither do I, he whispered. That evening, Kale walked toward the Vera estate. It had grown into a fortress. Thousands of soldiers stood around it. Kale approached the wall. He placed 2 fingers against the stone. The eclipse moved through his body. He sensed hundreds of dragon bonds inside the fortress. One bond was different. It felt wounded. Familiar. Seraphine. Kale followed the connection. He reached the highest tower. There, behind a window of black glass, stood his sister. She looked older. Her crimson armor covered her body. Her hair had become shorter. Her eyes were tired. She was holding a hand against her chest. Then she spoke. I know you're there. Kale froze. Seraphine turned toward the window. Her eyes met his. For a moment, neither moved. Then her face changed. Shock, fear, and finally, something Kale had almost forgotten. Relief. Kale. He stepped into the light. Yes? Seraphine covered her mouth. You're alive? Apparently. She looked at him for several seconds. Then tears filled her eyes. I looked for you. Kale's expression hardened. I did? You never came? I was 13. You were 17. Seraphine flinched. Right. Kale looked away. She opened the door. Come inside. I don't know if I should. You should. Why? Because we have very little time. Kale entered. The moment the door closed, Seraphine grabbed his arm. You must leave this city before dawn. Why? Because Father knows you're here? Kale stared at her. How? She pointed at his chest. Is visible to the crown. Kale looked down. The silver symbol had begun glowing. Seraphine's voice lowered. Sure, because they need you. I know. No. You don't understand. She stepped closer. Crown isn't an artifact anymore. Kale frowned. What does that mean? It's alive. A cold silence filled the room. Seraphine continued. Every time I sleep, I hear something speaking inside my dreams. It calls itself the Sovereign. Kale remembered Oralith, the thing beneath the palace. Seraphine nodded. It has been awake for 3 years. Kale looked toward the window. Outside, city lights shimmered. You've been fighting it. I have been resisting it. That is different. Seraphine smiled sadly. A bell rang in the distance, then another, then dozens. Seraphine's face changed. They found you? The door exploded inward. Armored soldiers entered. Seraphine drew her sword. Kyle raised his hand. The soldiers stopped. Every dragon bond in their bodies vanished at once. Seraphine stared at Kyle. You really did awaken. Kale looked at her. No. His silver eyes brightened. I finally remembered who I am. Valedria felt strangely familiar when Kale walked through its streets. The markets were still crowded, still argued over prices. Children still chased small messenger dragons through the alleys. But Kale noticed something his younger self had never seen. Fear. People lowered their voices whenever Vera soldiers passed. Shopkeepers kept their doors half closed. Dragon handlers wore black bands around their wrists as signs of loyalty to the royal authority. The city looked prosperous, but the prosperity felt controlled. When Seraphine met him in the tower, Kale understood why. She was not the confident girl he remembered. She was tired. She had learned to smile for crowds and hide her pain behind armor. After the soldiers were defeated, she asked Kale to help her reach an old storage room. Inside was a collection of letters. All of them were addressed to Kale. He looked at her. Why didn't you send them? Seraphine looked away. I sent a letter every month for 2 years. Kale stared at the pile. Then why didn't I receive any? Father intercepted them. One letter had never been opened. Kale unfolded it. The handwriting was young and uneven. Dear Kale, I don't know where they took you. I don't know if you are alive. But I want you to know something. You were never a disappointment to me. Kyle stopped reading. He folded the letter carefully. Seraphine watched him, have fought harder. Kale shook his head. You were a child too. I was supposed to protect you. You couldn't protect yourself. And she finally looked at him, too easily. No, Kale smiled. I just don't want us to lose another 10 years. Seraphine began crying. Kale hugged her. Neither of them spoke. For the first time since they were children, they stood together without a Vera title between them. 6 THECR as Esh800 Seraphine stared at Kale as the unconscious soldiers lay scattered across the floor. You really did awaken, she repeated. Kale looked at his hands. I awakened something. That is not what I meant. She walked toward one of the fallen soldiers and removed his helmet. Beneath the black metal was a young man's face. His eyes were closed. A thin black line ran from his neck to his jaw. Kyle knelt beside him. A crown branding, Seraphine said. Can you remove it? I've tried. Kale touched the man's forehead. The eclipse flowed through his fingers. The black line recoiled as if it were alive. The soldier suddenly screamed. His body convulsed, appeared. He opened his eyes. Where am I? A Seraphine stared in disbelief. You broke the crown's control. Kale stood. Bonds. That's all. That is enough. She moved to the window. The crown has controlled thousands of soldiers. More. Kale looked down at the city. How many dragons? Seraphine didn't answer immediately. Every dragon in Valedria is connected to it now. Then why haven't they attacked the palace? Because the crown is still gathering strength. What happens when it finishes? Seraphine closed her eyes. It will no longer need a human vessel. KL remembered Oralith's warning. Then it becomes independent. Yes. And my father knows? He knows more than I do. A loud horn sounded outside. Kale and Seraphine looked at each other. Someone is coming, Kale said. Seraphine nodded. The palace guard. Can we leave? She smiled. Not through the front door. They escaped through an old tunnel beneath the tower. Lyra followed silently, led beyond the city walls to a ruined chapel. For the first time since returning, Kale breathed freely. Seraphine sat against a broken pillar. Owe you an explanation. Kale remained standing. You do. She looked at him. I did not know Father's plan when you were sent away. But you knew the hollow veil was dangerous. Wes? And you let them take me. Seraphine looked down. I was afraid. Kale's anger softened slightly. Off Father. Off what was behind him. She explained everything. 3 years after Kale disappeared, Lord Darius discovered an ancient chamber beneath the Vera Palace. Inside was a broken fragment of the dragon crown. The moment he touched it, every dragon in the estate reacted. The fragment began whispering. It promised immortality, promised the Vera family a throne over every kingdom. Darius believed the voice. Seraphine did not, but by then it was too late. Had already attached itself to her dragon. She uses me as a bridge? Seraphine whispered. Kale frowned. The crown cannot exist physically without a powerful dragon soul. Mine was strong enough. Kale looked at her. So Father plans to sacrifice you. During the ceremony. Then we stopped the ceremony. Seraphine shook her head, caused the crown to awaken violently. Then what can we do? She looked at Kale. You. Kale's eyes narrowed. The eclipse? Wes. She touched the silver mark. The crown cannot control what it cannot bindeth. Kale thought of Oralith. We need the ancient dragon. Which dragon? Aralith. Seraphine stared. The one your family chained beneath the hollow veil. Her face went pale. Then the stories were true. Mikhail looked at her. You knew. Only rumors. Then we need to return there. Before Seraphine could answer, the ground shook. A crack appeared across the chapel floor. A voice emerged from beneath it. Kale Vera. The air became cold. The crown remembers you. Akale drew his sword. Lyra spread her wings. Seraphine raised her crimson blade. The voice laughed. You may hide in mountains. You may hide in ruins. But every dragon hears me. A massive eye opened beneath the floor. Kale stepped forward. Then let them hear me too. He released the eclipse. The eye disappeared. But far away, beneath Valedria, something enormous woke. Escape from the tower was harder than Kale expected. The crown had already begun adapting to the eclipse. Every time Kale broke one bond, Seraphine noticed the strain. Stop. Kale shook his head. People trapped. You're burning through your own strength. Kale looked at the unconscious soldier he had freed. He was someone's son. Seraphine had no answer. They reached the abandoned chapel. Inside, Cal saw old paintings of the first dragon guardians. They were ordinary people. Farmers, healers, smiths, travelers, all of them standing beside dragons. One painting showed a young girl sitting beside an ancient dragon. The inscription below it read, "Freedom begins when neither side fears the other." The Kale touched the painting. The eclipse responded. He saw another memory. The girl from the mural. The first ember. She was not a warrior. She was a healer. She had saved a wounded dragon during the first war. That dragon became her companion. Together they created the first free bond. The crown was later built to imitate that connection. But it copied only the obedience and ignored the choice. Kale understood why the crown hated the ember. The ember proved that control was unnecessary. Seraphine read the inscription. So the crown wasn't created to protect people. No, Kale said. It was created because people were afraid that freedom would make them powerless. Seraphine smiled. And now we know better. Pe art 7 mertu aranto the hollow dova aoli. They traveled through the mountains for 6 days. Seraphine wore no armor. Kale carried only his black sword. Lyra flew ahead, scouting the path. Neither sibling spoke much. The silence between them was filled with years of things never said. On the 7th morning, they reached the hollow vale. Seraphine stared at the black cliffs. I've never been here, Kale smiled bitterly. I have. She looked at him. What happened to you here? I almost died. That wasn't what I meant. Kale looked toward the mountains. I became someone different. They entered the vale. The beasts that once attacked Kale stayed away. Even the wild dragons hid, Seraphine noticed, are afraid of you. They recognize the mark. What is the eclipse really? Kale hesitated. I don't know. They reached the underground chamber before sunset. But Aurelith was not alone. The 7 chains had been damaged. Blood covered the stone floor. Kale rushed forward. Aurelith. The dragon's voice came from the darkness. You came back. Aurelith emerged from the shadows. Only 5 chains remained. He was wounded. Seraphine stared at him. You're real. Aurelith smiled. You sound disappointed. She stepped forward. Sorry. For what? For what my family did? Aurelith studied her face. You did not place the chains. But I benefited from them. The dragon nodded. Then perhaps you are different from your father. Kale approached. Someone attacked you. The crown. Aurelith's voice became serious. It has begun collecting the ancient dragon's spirits. How? By promising them freedom. Kale frowned. And then it consumes them. Seraphine stepped forward. Why? Aurelith looked at her. Because the crown is not trying to control dragons anymore. He looked toward the ceiling. It is trying to become one. Kale felt a chill. Dragon without a soul. Aurelith explained the history. Long before Valedria existed, First Dragon King created the crown to unite dragon clans during a devastating war. But the crown developed its own hunger. It wanted the strength of dragons without their emotions. The first dragons realized what it had become and tried to destroy it. They failed, survived as fragments. The Vera family eventually discovered one. And Lord Darius awakened it. The ceremony isn't about giving the crown to Seraphine, Cale said. No, Orlith replied. It is about feeding the crown enough dragon souls to rebuild itself. Seraphine closed her eyes. How many have already been taken? 30, 7 ancient dragons. Cale tightened his grip. Then, we are running out of time? Orlith nodded. There is one way to destroy it. What? The first ember. Cale looked confused. I thought the eclipse was the first ember. It is the bloodline. Orlith pointed at Lyra. The ember is the bond between a dragon and a human who choose each other freely. Lyra tilted her head. You mean me? Orlith smiled. Not you alone. He looked at Cale and Seraphine. The three of you together form something the crown cannot imitate. Seraphine frowned. Human blood. Dragon blood. And the power to sever false bonds. Cale finally understood. Trolls through fear? Less? Would defeat it through choice. Orlith nodded. There is another problem. Cale looked at him. What? Your father has already begun the ceremony. Cale's eyes widened. Tonight. Orlith released his final chains. The chamber shook. The ancient dragon rose. Seraphine stared upward. Orlith's wings spread across the chamber. Then we fly. For the first time in centuries, Orlith left the mountain. Hollow Vale erupted as the ancient dragon rose into the night. Cale rode on his back. Seraphine rode beside him. Lyra flew beneath them. The capital of Veledria appeared in the distance. And above it, the sky had turned black. The flight to the Hollow Vale gave Cale time to speak with Orlith. He asked why the ancient dragon had waited for him. Orlith explained that prophecies were often misunderstood. The ancestors believed a hero would arrive. He said, the truth was simpler. What was it? Someone had to choose. Cale looked at him. Choose what? Whether dragons remained prisoners. Seraphine listened. Orlith continued. Every generation waited for someone stronger than the last. They believed power would solve the problem. And it never did. No. The ancient dragon looked toward Veledria. Power was always the problem. They reached the cavern and found Orlith's chains weakened. Cale helped break the final restraints. First moved the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling. Seraphine laughed. You could have warned us. Orlith answered. I haven't moved freely in 400 years. Cale smiled. Then move carefully. Orlith laughed. It was the first time Cale had heard the dragon sound truly happy. The old creature took off through the mountain opening. His roar echoed for miles. Wild dragons emerged from the forests and followed him. Cale saw the meaning immediately. They were not going to war. They were answering a call. Tichi Saramoma off below Veledria was under attack, not from an invading army, from its own dragons. Every dragon bonded to the crown had gone wild. They filled the sky. Fire reigned over the outer districts. People fled through the streets. Soldiers fought their own beasts. At the center of the city stood the royal palace. Its highest tower had transformed. Black crystal covered the walls. Red eye opened above the roof. Cale stared. The crown. Orlith roared. The sound shook the city. The dragons in the sky turned toward him. For a moment, they hesitated. Orlith spoke into the minds of every dragon within reach. You are not slaves. Some dragons resisted. Others began to break away from the crown's command. Cale released the eclipse. One by one, golden threads snapped across the sky. Hundreds of dragons were freed. The city fell silent. Then a massive crimson dragon appeared above the palace. Seraphine gasped. That is mine. But the dragon was no longer hers. Its eyes glowed black. The crown had consumed its soul. Father, Seraphine whispered. Darius appeared on the palace roof. He wore armor made from red scales. A crown-shaped mark covered his forehead. Children, he called. Why have you returned? Cale landed on the roof. Because you failed to kill me. Darius laughed. You sent me to the Hollow Vale. I sent you where you belonged. Cale raised his sword, looked at Seraphine. Seraphine stepped forward. You sacrificed me. I elevated you, imprisoned me. I made you powerful. You destroyed my life. Darius's eyes hardened. You never understood what it means to be a Vera. Seraphine's voice became cold. No. She drew her sword, finally understand what it means not to be won. The battle began. Seraphine fought her corrupted dragon. Kael faced the crown soldiers. Orlith attacked the palace barriers. Lyra flew through the halls, freeing prisoners. Darius remained on the highest platform. He did not fight. Then the crown spoke through him. Calm, eclipse bearer. Kael looked upward. A giant black dragon began forming above the palace. It had no scales. Its body was made of shadow and red light. Every dragon in the city screamed. Orlith roared, "That is impossible." Kael raised his sword. "Can we kill it?" Orlith answered, "Only if you reach its heart." "Where is its heart?" The ancient dragon looked at Seraphine. "In her." Kael's eyes widened. Crown had fused its core with Seraphine's dragon soul. Destroying it would kill her. Darius smiled. "Now you understand?" Kael stared at him. "You never cared about her." "I care about the kingdom." "You care about power." Darius raised his hand. The black dragon descended. "Then prove your love for your sister." The dragon attacked. Kael raised the eclipse. The impact shattered the palace tower. Stone fell around them. Screamed. Kael. He saw the crown's energy inside her. It was wrapped around her soul like chains. He could break them. If he did it too quickly, the crown would explode. He needed another way. Lyra landed beside him. "I know what to do." Kael looked at her. She stared directly at Seraphine. "She is afraid." Kael nodded. "We all are." Lyra shook her head. No, she looked at him. "She is afraid of being alone." Kael understood. He approached Seraphine. "Look at me." She struggled against the crown. "Do you trust me?" Tears ran down her face. "Yes." "Then choose." But the crown screamed. Seraphine closed her eyes. Phew. The bond changed. The crown lost its grip. Kael released the eclipse. A silver wave moved through her body. The black chain shattered. Seraphine's crimson dragon emerged from her chest. But the crown did not die. It escaped. It flew into Lord Darius. His body transformed. Scales covered his skin. His bones twisted. His eyes became red. He looked at his children and smiled. "Now," the crown whispered through him, "I no longer need a vessel." The entire palace exploded. The ceremony at the palace had been prepared for generations. Thousands of candles burned beneath the crown chamber. Royal priests had memorized the words of the ritual. The Vera Council stood in ceremonial robes. Seraphine had been prepared for sacrifice without being told the whole truth. Her dragon had been weakened over months. Her dreams were monitored, emotions manipulated. Darius believed this was necessary. He believed one terrible act could prevent a greater disaster. But the crown never intended to stop. It wanted more. It whispered promises to everyone who touched it. To soldiers, it promised victory. To nobles, it promised wealth. To Darius, it promised a world where his family could never be powerless again. Kael realized that the crown understood the deepest fear of every person it controlled. That was why it was dangerous. It did not force people immediately. It offered them exactly what they secretly wanted. Kael understood then that defeating it required more than breaking magic. People had to reject the temptation themselves. When he asked Seraphine whether she was ready to resist, she answered without hesitation. "I don't want to be powerful if the price is someone else's freedom." Kael smiled. "Then you're stronger than the crown." Party 9, Tiachi Dergodo Onerbaiti showed a soul, the palace fell apart. Kael grabbed Seraphine and jumped from the collapsing tower. Orlith caught them in midair. Behind them, the capital burned. At the center of the destruction stood Lord Darius. Except he was no longer a man. He had become something enormous, a dragon made of black crystal and red fire. The crown had transformed him into its first true body. Orlith's voice thundered, "Do not attack blindly." Kael looked down. The creature was drawing power from every remaining dragon bond in the city. The more dragons it controlled, it became. "We need to break the network," Kael said. Orlith nodded, then reached the old bell tower. "What is there?" "The first command seal." Kael and Lyra flew toward it. Seraphine followed. The city was chaotic. Dragons fought in the streets. Citizens hid beneath ruins. Soldiers cried for help. Kael saw a child trapped beneath a fallen wall. Seraphine landed beside him. "We can't save everyone." Kael looked at the child. We save who we can. Together they lifted the stone, escaped. Kale smiled. Then the crown attacked. A beam of black fire tore through the street. Orlith shielded them. His scales cracked. Kale, Orlith! I am fine. He was not. Blood ran down his side. Kyle clenched his fists. They reached the bell tower. Inside was an ancient mechanism. 7 bronze rings surrounded a black crystal. Cal touched it. Memories flooded his mind. He saw the first Dragon King. He saw the crown being created. He saw the moment it gained consciousness. He saw the first rebellion. And finally, he saw something unexpected. A human woman standing beside a small dragon. They were holding hands. The dragon was smiling. The woman was crying. The crown was destroyed by their bond, power, through trust. Kale, this isn't a weapon. Seraphine stared at him. What? The seal. He looked at Lyra, responds to free bonds. Lyra approached the crystal. She touched it with her forehead. Nothing happened. Then Kale placed his hand against hers. Up! Seraphine joined them. The tower shook. 7 beams of silver light rose into the sky. Every dragon in Valedria felt them, screamed. No. For the first time, fear entered its voice. Orlith attacked. The ancient dragon pierced the crown's outer barrier, released the eclipse. The 7 command lines shattered. Across the kingdom, dragons broke free. Darius roared. His massive body began collapsing, but the crown escaped from him. It became a black sphere. Kale looked at Orlith. Where will it go? The dragon stared toward the horizon, to the place where it was born. The first dragon temple. Orlith nodded. There is no temple. Kale frowned. Then where? Orlith looked at the northern sky. The sky grave. Seraphine's face went pale. Place is a myth? No? Orlith replied. It is a prison. Kale looked at Lyra. She seemed uneasy. Prison there. Orlith's voice became barely a whisper. The first dragon. The city battle lasted until dawn. Kale and Seraphine moved from district to district, freeing dragons. Every bond he broke released memories. One dragon had been chained for 60 years. Another had been forced to fight in royal arenas. A third had never seen open sky. Kale cried when he touched them. Not because of his own pain, because he could feel theirs. One ancient dragon asked him a question. Why are you helping us? Kale answered, creature should need permission to be alive. The dragon bowed its head. Then it flew. By sunrise, thousands of dragons filled the sky. The city had never seen anything like it. Instead of destroying Valedria, the dragons formed a shield around it. They protected the people from the remaining crown energy. The sight changed the hearts of many citizens. They saw dragons not as monsters, as beings capable of choosing to protect. Seraphine stood beside Kale on the ruined palace roof. We might actually win. Kale looked at the sky. Do you believe that? Not yet. She laughed. At least you're honest. Par T10, TSKGRAV, the journey north lasted 9 days. They traveled above the clouds. Only Orlith was large enough to survive the storms. Lyra flew beside them. Seraphine trained constantly. She had lost her Crimson Sun connection, but gained something new. A free dragon bond. Her dragon, once corrupted, was now smaller and calmer. She named it Solon. Solon and Lyra became companions. Kale watched his sister change. She was no longer trying to become the strongest knight. She was learning to become herself. On the 9th night, the stars disappeared. Orlith stopped. Ahead of them floated a gigantic island in the sky, made entirely of white stone. Broken dragon statues covered its surface. At its center stood a door. No walls, no building. Only a door floating in the air. Kale landed. This is the sky grave? Orlith nodded. Beyond that door is the first dragon. Why was it imprisoned? Because it wanted to destroy all human civilization. Seraphine stared, and the crown served it. Orlith shook his head. The crown was afraid of it. Kale touched the door. It opened. Inside was darkness. They entered. The door vanished behind them. There was no floor. They floated in a sea of stars. A voice spoke. Who carries the eclipse? Kim answered. I do. Who carries the ember? Lyra stepped forward. Who carries the crown's broken soul? Seraphine raised her hand. I do. Silence. Then a gigantic eye opened. Dragon emerged from the darkness. Its body was transparent. Stars moved through its scales. Its wings were larger than mountains. Kyle could not move. Dragon looked at him. You are the descendant. Off home. The one who betrayed me. Akael frowned. Orlith lowered his head. The ancient dragon continued. She was human. Akael saw the same woman from the memory. She loved a dragon. The dragon's eyes softened. They created the first free bond. Then humans became afraid of dragons. They built the crown. Kale looked at the creature. What happened? The crown turned against everyone. The dragon paused. Your ancestor sacrificed herself to imprison me? Kale realized the truth. The Eclipse bloodline had not been created to defeat dragons. It had been created to protect them from the crown. You are not our enemy, Kale said. The dragon smiled. No. Then the black sphere appeared. The crown had found them. It merged with the first dragon's chains. The entire sky shook. The dragon roared. Destroy it? Kale stepped forward. Kyle raised his sword. Seraphine joined him. Lyra flew overhead. Auralith charged. For the first time, 4 generations of dragon power stood together. But the crown was stronger than before. It absorbed the prison. The first dragon screamed. Auralith shouted. Not the crown? Kale looked confused. Destroy the fear behind it. Akale closed his eyes. He entered the crown's memories. There were millions of voices. Humans afraid of dragons. Dragons afraid of humans. Kings afraid of losing power. Children taught to hate creatures they had never met. The crown was made from fear. Kale understood what he needed to do. He did not attack. He listened. He reached in the darkness and whispered, You can stop. The crown froze. Every voice became silent. Kale continued. You don't need to control anyone. The crown trembled. You don't need to be a king. The black sphere cracked. You can choose. The crown shattered. A wave of light exploded across the sky grave. The first dragon smiled. Then it vanished. The chains disappeared. The floating island began to break apart. Auralith grabbed Kale. Run. They flew through the collapsing stars. Behind them, the sky grave disappeared, and with it, the last fragment of the dragon crown. Inside the sky grave, Kale experienced every era of dragon history at once. He saw kingdoms rise and vanish. He saw humans and dragons once living peacefully. He saw fear begin after the first dragon war. He saw humans build weapons to protect themselves. Then he saw those weapons become reasons to fear again. The cycle repeated for thousands of years. Dragon told him the truth. No species is born evil, it said. But fear can teach them to behave as though they are. Akale asked, was the crown created? Because someone wanted certainty. Certainty? To guarantee that no dragon could ever hurt a human again. Akale looked at the shattered stars around them. It became a weapon that hurt everyone. Yes. The dragon smiled sadly. That is what certainty often becomes. Kale finally understood why the crown could never be defeated by force alone. Built from fear could always be rebuilt while fear remained. So the true victory was not destroying the crown. It was destroying the need for it. Levin, Tietchi fellow off Tietchi Varainama. When Kale returned to Valedria, he expected ruins. Instead, he found silence. The dragons had stopped attacking. The black crystal covering the palace had turned white and begun to crumble. People emerged from shelters. Soldiers dropped their weapons. Surviving dragons flew freely above the city. For the first time in centuries, no dragon in Valedria wore a chain of command. Landed outside the palace. Seraphine climbed down. Cal followed. Thousands of people gathered. No one knew what to say. Stepped forward. He pointed at Kale. Are you the one who freed the dragons? Kale looked at him. I helped. The boy smiled. A woman pulled the boy back. Don't get close to him. Kale understood. Not everyone trusted him. He couldn't blame them. Generations, the Vera name had represented power. Now it represented fear. Seraphine stepped onto the palace steps. I am Seraphine Vera. The crowd became quiet. She removed the crest from her armor, served a system that enslaved dragons. Some people shouted. Others demanded punishment. Seraphine raised her hand. I will not defend what my family did. She placed the crest on the ground. I am surrendering House Vera's authority over the Eastern Territories. Shock spread through the crowd. Kale stared at her. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. She looked at him. If the old house survives unchanged, someone else will repeat the same mistake. The city council arrived. They arrested the remaining Vera ministers. Darius was found unconscious in the palace ruins. The crown was gone. But Darius survived. They placed him in a guarded chamber. Kale visited him alone. His father sat against the wall. Without armor, he looked old. You came? Darius said. Kale stood several steps away. Wanted to see the man who sent me away. Darius laughed quietly. You think I regret it? Kale said nothing. No something. Darius stared at him. I knew you were different from the day you were born. Kale's jaw tightened. Then, why didn't you protect me? Because I was afraid. The answer surprised him. Darius looked down. I watched kingdoms destroy each other because men wanted dragon power. I believed that if I controlled the crown first, prevent anyone else from using it. You became the thing you feared. Yes. Darius closed his eyes. I thought power would make me strong enough to protect the family. Kale's voice softened. Father, you protected the name. Darius looked up. You destroyed the people who carried it. Silence followed. For the first time, Kale felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness. Not hatred. Pity. Your punishment will be decided by the council. Darius nodded. I know. Kale reached the door. Kale. He stopped. Kale did not turn around. I know. Outside, Sarah waited. How was he? Human. She smiled sadly. That's more than he allowed himself to be for a long time. The Orlith called from outside. They approached him. Age is ending, the dragon said. Kyle looked at the city. What comes next? Orlith spread his wings. That is for humans and dragons to decide. Kale smiled. For the first time, he believed him. After the palace fell, the kingdom entered a difficult period. Without the Vera family controlling the Western armies, several nobles attempted to seize power. Some wanted to restore the old system. Others wanted revenge against anyone connected to House Vera. Kyle refused both. He traveled to villages where people had lost families because of the crown. He listened. He did not defend his family. He did not ask for forgiveness. He simply listened. In one village, an old farmer told him that his daughter had been killed by a dragon during the first days of the crown's awakening. Farmer said, I hate dragons. Kale nodded. I understand. The farmer looked surprised. You want to argue? No. What? Why? Because you lost someone. The farmer lowered his head. Later, dragon approached the village. The villagers wanted to kill it. Kale stepped between them. The dragon was terrified. He touched its mind. It carried memories of another human who had protected it. Kale realized it had not come to attack. It had come because it recognized the farmer's daughter's scent. The dragon had been her companion. The farmer began to cry. He lowered his weapon, approached. Neither human nor dragon apologized. They simply stood near each other. Sometimes peace did not begin with agreement. Sometimes it began when someone decided not to strike. Part 12. The lust trial. 3 months passed. Valedria changed rapidly. The dragon guilds were dissolved. Bonding rituals became voluntary. Dragon hunters were outlawed. Ancient dragon sanctuaries were opened. Seraphine traveled across the kingdom, helping free bonded dragons from old magical restraints. Kale remained in the capital. He trained. He studied. He learned that freedom was harder than victory. Without the crown, there was no single ruler controlling dragon power. The kingdom needed a new system. One morning, a messenger arrived. Kale Vera. Yes. You are summoned to the Council of 7. Kale entered the council chamber. 7 leaders waited around a circular table. The High Chancellor spoke first. The kingdom needs a guardian. Kale frowned. I'm not interested in politics. You don't need to be. The Chancellor placed an ancient scroll on the table. The guardian is not a king. He is a protector who ensures neither humans nor dragons can enslave the other. Kale read the document. And you want me? Your eclipse makes you the only candidate capable of breaking a dragon bond. Kale looked toward Seraphine. She stood among the advisors. What do you think? She smiled. I think you should decide for yourself. Kale looked down at the scroll. He remembered the hollow veil, the cold nights, the hunger, the fear. He remembered Orlith, Lyra, Seraphine, and the child in the ruins. He picked up the scroll. I will do it. The council approved his appointment. But before the ceremony could begin, an alarm sounded. A dragon had been found dead near the northern border, not killed by a human. Its soul had been removed. Kale immediately knew what it meant. Seraphine said, Yes. Then who did this? Kale touched the dragon's skull. A memory entered his mind. Someone wearing black robes, a red eye painted on their forehead. A voice whispered, the crown was never alone. Kyle stepped back. The crown had followers. Orlith arrived moments later. His expression was grave. They called themselves the Choir of Ash. Kale looked at him. What do they want? To resurrect the first crown. Seraphine frowned. Impossible. Orlith shook his head. Not impossible. He looked toward the mountains. Only difficult. The choir had existed in secret for centuries. They believed dragons and humans could never coexist peacefully, create a world where all dragon souls were absorbed into one consciousness. No free dragons, no free humans, only one mind. Kale asked, were they? Orlith answered, everywhere. That night, attacks began across the kingdom. Sanctuaries were destroyed. Eggs were stolen. Dragon healers disappeared. The choir wanted to force the kingdom into another war. Kale gathered a small group, Seraphine, Lyra, Orlith, several free dragons who had chosen to fight beside them. Their mission was simple. Find the choir. Stop the resurrection. Prove that the Age of Chains was truly over. The new Dragon Council faced its first major debate over whether Astra should be allowed to live freely. Some leaders called her a future disaster. One official said, she was created from evil. Kale answered, so were many of the institutions you now defend. The room fell silent. He asked everyone to imagine being blamed for the circumstances of their birth. Astra sat outside the chamber listening through the door. She asked Kale, do they hate me? Some do. Will they always? I don't know. She looked sad. Kale knelt beside her. You don't need everyone to love you to know who you are. Astra smiled. That sounds like something you learned the hard way. Kale laughed. Very hard. Part 13 The Showaroff Ash. The trail led to a ruined city beneath the western mountains. The city had been abandoned for hundreds of years. Ash covered the streets. No birds flew there. No insects moved. The silence felt unnatural. Kale entered the central temple. Hundreds of people stood inside. They wore black robes. Their faces were hidden. At the center stood a woman. She removed her hood. Kyle recognized her immediately, Morel. His aunt. He believed she had died during the palace battle. Apparently, she had escaped. You always did underestimate me, she said. Kale drew his sword. I serve order. I served order. You murdered dragons. I removed chaos. Seraphine stepped forward. You tried to sacrifice me? Morel smiled. You were the strongest vessel available. Seraphine's eyes hardened. You call that order? Wes. Morel raised her hand. The temple walls opened. Thousands of jars appeared. Inside each jar floated a glowing dragon soul. Lyra gasped. They are alive. Not for long, Morel said. Kyle released the eclipse. Began shaking. Morel smiled. You can break bonds. She revealed a black crystal. But can you break yourself? The crystal exploded. Kale fell to his knees. A voice entered his mind. The eclipse is hungry. He saw images of every dragon he had ever touched. He felt their pain. Maurice flooded him. He screamed. Seraphine ran toward him. Kale? Morel laughed. The eclipse was never designed to be used forever. It consumes the one who carries it. Kale struggled to breathe. Orlith roared. Remember the ember? Kale closed his eyes, touched his forehead. You are not alone. He heard Seraphine's voice. We choose you. Orlith added, and we stand with you. The darkness inside Kale weakened. He opened his eyes. Silver light filled the temple. Morel stepped backward. The Kale stood. The eclipse is not mine. He looked at Lyra. It belongs to the bond. Kale released his power. The jars opened. Thousands of dragon souls escaped. The choir screamed. Morel attacked. Seraphine intercepted her. Their swords clashed. You were always father's favorite, Morel said. Seraphine replied, I was never his child. She broke Morel's sword. Morel fell. The temple began collapsing. Kael reached the central chamber. There he found a giant black egg. The shell pulsed like a heartbeat. Orolith's expression changed. That is not the crown. Kael looked at him. The vessel the crown was meant to possess. The egg cracked. A black claw emerged. Then a voice whispered. Everyone froze. Lyra stepped backward. Kael stared at the egg. What is that? Orolith answered quietly. The child of the first crown. The shell exploded. A creature emerged. It looked like a dragon. But its eyes were human, and it knew Kael's name, had believed herself smarter than everyone else. She had spent years studying the crown. She knew its rituals, its weaknesses, its history. She had made one mistake. She believed knowledge gave her the right to decide for others. As the temple collapsed, she looked at the liberated dragon souls flying into the sky. For the first time, she understood that the creatures she had called resources had always been individuals. She reached toward one escaping soul. It flew past her. Myrel whispered, so that's freedom. Seraphine answered, yes. Myrel looked at her. I don't know how to live in a world where I don't control anything. Seraphine smiled sadly. Th did. Part 14, Th ice, oft, farst ember, the creature was small. At first, Kael expected a monster. Instead, it looked frightened. It had black scales and silver wings. Its eyes were bright blue. It stared at Kael. Kael? The voice was soft. Lyra moved protectively in front of him. Who are you? Kael asked. The creature looked toward Orolith. Your enemy. Orolith did not move. No. The creature looked surprised. You are the child of the crown? Orolith continued. You are not the crown. Kael realized what had happened. The choir had tried to create a new host. The vessel had developed its own consciousness. What is your name? Kael asked. The creature hesitated. I don't have one. Kael smiled. One. The creature looked at Lyra. Lyra. Lyra tilted her head. Why me? Because you chose freedom. Kael thought for a moment. Then your name will be Astra. The creature smiled. Astra. Outside, Teppo, the remaining choir members attacked. They wanted Astra dead. Kael and his allies fought through the ruins. Astra refused to kill. She used her power only to protect herself. Kael noticed something. Her energy did not feel like the crown. It felt like something new. A free dragon born from the remains of an ancient weapon. When the final battle ended, Myrel remained alive. She stared at Astra. You don't understand what you are. Astra approached her. Neither did you. Myrel looked away. For the first time, she seemed ashamed. Choir was defeated. But the kingdom now faced a new question. What would happen to Astra? Some leaders demanded that she be destroyed. Others wanted to study her. A few wanted to weaponize her. Kael refused all three. She is not an object. The council argued. She was created from the crown. She is alive. She could become dangerous. So could I. The room went silent. Kael placed his hand on the table. If we destroy everything we fear, we will become the same people who created the crown. Seraphine stood beside him. I agree. Orolith lowered his head. I agree. The council finally voted. Astra would be protected not as a weapon, not as a prisoner. As the first dragon born into freedom after the end of the crown, months passed. A new sanctuary was built in the mountains. Humans and dragons worked together. Astra learned to fly. Lyra taught her how to hunt. Seraphine taught her swordplay. Kael taught her the most important lesson. Never let anyone tell you what you are supposed to be. Astra nodded. Supposed to be. Kael smiled. I am still figuring that out. One evening, Kael stood at the edge of the sanctuary. Sun was setting. Dragons flew above the valley. Children played beside them. For the first time, there were no chains, no crown, no bloodline deciding a creature's destiny. Seraphine approached. Were you happy? Kael looked at the sunset. I think so. She smiled. Good? Kael turned toward her. And you? Seraphine thought for a moment. I am learning. He nodded. A roar echoed across the mountains. Kael looked up. A dragon flew beneath the stars. Its wings were silver. Its scales glowed red. Watch from the cliff. The old world is gone, he said. Kale looked at the dragon. And the new one? Orlith smiled. That depends on you. Astra's first flight was terrible. She crashed into a tree. Lyra laughed so loudly that Kale had to hold her back. Astra complained that the tree had moved. It absolutely did not, Kale said. It looks suspicious. Seraphine shook her head. You are definitely a Vera. Astra smiled. For the first time, she had a family. Not because of blood. Not because of design. Because people chose her. Kyle realized that this was the final lesson of the entire journey. The old world had defined family through inheritance. The new world could define it through choice. Part 15. The last EMBER 5 years later. The kingdom of Valedria looked nothing like it had before. The old noble houses had lost their authority over dragons. The Dragon Council became a council for both species. Human villages built sanctuaries where wild dragons could come and go. Dragon healers became respected members of society. The old word for dragon knight was replaced. They were now called dragon guardians. Their purpose was not to command dragons, protect the bond between humans and dragons. Kale Vera became the first guardian. He hated ceremonies. He hated titles. He especially hated when people called him the last ember. But the title remained, not because he was the last of his bloodline, because he was the last person who remembered what the old world had cost. Seraphine became a teacher. She trained young guardians to understand that strength was not control. Orlith returned to the Hollow Vale. He said he wanted peace. No one believed him. Lyra became known as the Silver Wing. Astra became the first dragon ambassador. She traveled between human cities and dragon sanctuaries. And Lord Darius, he spent the final years of his life in a small monastery far from the capital. He was not forgiven by everyone, but he was allowed to live. Kale visited him once a year. During their final meeting, Darius looked older than ever. You became stronger than I imagined, he said. Kale smiled. Became something different. Darius nodded. That is better. He looked out the window. Did you ever forgive me? Kale was silent for a long time. Forgave the boy I was for believing I needed your approval. Darius closed his eyes. That is enough. He died 3 days later. Kale returned to the capital. He stood beneath the statue of the first free dragon. A crowd gathered. A young girl approached him. Kyle. Yes. Is it true that you once had no dragon flame? Kale laughed. Then how did you become strong? Kale looked toward the mountains. He saw Lyra flying above the sanctuary. He saw Astra beside her. He saw Seraphine teaching children. He saw humans and dragons traveling together. Then he answered, I stopped trying to become what other people wanted me to be. The girl thought about it. Is that the secret? Kale smiled. One of them. What is the other? Kale looked at the sky. Choose your bonds. The girl nodded. Then she ran back to her parents. Kale remained beneath the statue. The wind moved through the city. A dragon landed on a nearby tower. Its scales shimmered under the sunset. Kale smiled. He remembered a boy standing before the sunstone, a boy with no flame, a boy who thought he was worthless, a boy who believed his family had abandoned him because he was weak. But the truth had always been different. The flame was there. It simply did not belong to the world that had judged him. It belonged to a different future. A future where dragons were not weapons. Family was not determined by blood alone, where power was not measured by how many people you could control. Being strong meant having the courage to choose. Kale looked at the sunset. The last light of the day reflected on his silver eyes. He touched the old mark on his chest. The eclipse no longer burned. It rested quietly beneath his skin. Not a weapon, not a curse. A reminder of the Hollow Vale, a reminder of Orlith, a reminder of Seraphine, a reminder of Lyra, a reminder of every dragon that had once lived in chains, and a reminder that freedom was not something given by kings. It was something chosen, protected. Astra landed beside him. Kale. He turned. The children are waiting. For what? To hear your story. Kale smiled. My story? Astra nodded. They want to know how the weak boy became the last ember. Kyle looked toward the sanctuary. He could hear laughter. The laughter of children. The calls of dragons. The sound of a world beginning again. He walked toward them. Behind him, the sun disappeared beneath the mountains. In the darkness, something remained, not a crown, not a throne, not an empire, a single ember. Small, quiet, unbreakable. For as long as humans and dragons remembered the truth, that ember would never die. On the 10th anniversary of Kel's return, Valedria held a festival. Children dressed as dragons. Dragons carried lanterns. Music filled the streets. At sunset, Kale stood before the crowd. A young boy asked him to tell the story of the day his flame failed. Kale smiled. My flame did not fail. The crowd became quiet. I failed to understand it. He explained that a person could spend years trying to fit into an expectation created by someone else. A life built entirely around other people's approval would never truly belong to you. The boy asked, I do. Kale looked at the dragons flying above the city. Learn who you are. Choose good people. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. And when someone tells you that you are worthless, remember that they may simply be looking at you from the wrong place. The crowd applauded. Kale looked toward Seraphine. She was smiling. Above them, an astra crossed the orange sky. For one brief moment, Kyle remembered the night he had left the Vera estate. He remembered being afraid. He remembered believing the darkness meant his life was ending. Now he understood. The darkness had only hidden the road. It had never been the end. THEND pars S Kenny 1 BE4AT Hologo Valley. The night before Cal left the estate, he could not sleep. He sat beside the window and watched the courtyard below. Servants moved between buildings carrying lanterns. Guards changed shifts. Somewhere in the stables, a young dragon cried for its handler. Kyle remembered being 5 years old and following Seraphine into those same stables. She had lifted him onto the back of her first training dragon and told him not to be afraid. Your family, she had said. He wondered whether family could disappear in a single day. He opened his mother's book again. The remaining pages contained fragments about the eclipse. Most references had been scratched out by someone using a knife. One sentence remained. The eclipse will appear empty to those who only recognize fire. Kale read it 3 times. He finally understood why the sunstone had remained silent. It had not been measuring flame. It had been hiding a truth. At midnight, the door opened. Seraphine entered. I heard you're leaving. Kale did not answer. She closed the door behind her. I am sorry. Kale looked at her. I know. She sat beside him. Do you hate me? He wanted to say yes. Instead, he said, not yet. Seraphine laughed through tears. I deserve that. They sat together until dawn. Before leaving, Seraphine gave him a small silver ring. It belonged to Mother. Kale stared at it. Are you giving it to me? Because I think she knew this day would come. Kale slipped the ring onto his finger. When the carriage arrived, he carried nothing from the estate except the ring, the old book, the words of a sister who had failed to stop what happened, but had never stopped loving him. Estina 2. The Fianai Gachtai and Tech I Vale Kale learned quickly that sleeping in the hollow vale was dangerous. Every sound could become a warning. Every silence could be a trap. He built a shelter between 2 rocks and placed small stones around the entrance. If something stepped near him, the stones would fall. He kept the broken sword beside his hand. At midnight, the stones moved. Kale woke instantly. A pair of yellow eyes appeared in the darkness. He raised the blade. The creature entered the moonlight. It was a young dragon. Thin. Starving. Kale lowered his sword. You don't look like you're here to kill me. The dragon growled. Kale slowly placed water in a bowl. Did not move. Kale pushed the bowl forward. After a long pause, the creature drank. He wrapped its wing with a piece of cloth from his shirt, watched him. Then it disappeared into the fog. Kale thought that was the end. The next morning, the creature returned. It sat outside his shelter. Kale laughed. You followed me. The dragon blinked. That became their silent routine for several days. Kale never named it. Years later, when he found Lyra, he understood why that first encounter mattered. The Hollow Veil was not trying to teach him how to dominate dragons. It was teaching him to notice when a creature needed help. 3. A URL to H memory. One evening, Orlith allowed Kale to see his oldest memory. Kale entered a world without kingdoms. Dragons flew freely over oceans. Humans lived in small villages. They traded food with dragon clans. Children played beneath enormous wings. No walls between species. Then a human king decided that dragons were too powerful. He built the first binding spell. At first it was used only during war. Then it was used for labor. Then transport. Then entertainment. Eventually, dragon bonds became symbols of status. Watch the cycle repeat. He had fought against it, but he had also made mistakes. At one point, he had responded to human cruelty by destroying a human city. Thousands died. Kael saw the memory. You regret it. Orolith answered, every day. Why didn't you stop? Because anger feels righteous when you are hurt. Kael understood the dragon's greatest lesson was not how to become powerful. It was how to survive having power without becoming cruel. CN4. Kael's fires T-Rail Visituar before returning to Valedria. Kael fought an ancient guardian beast inside the mountain. Watched but did not help. The beast was faster than Kael. Its claws shattered stone. Its scales reflected the eclipse. Kael tried attacking. Worked. Finally, he stopped fighting. The beast charged. Kael stepped aside and touched its forehead. He saw its memory, guarding the same doorway for 3,000 years. No one had ever told it why. It had forgotten its master's name. Kael whispered, it can stop guarding. The beast lowered its head. It disappeared into light. Orolith smiled. That was your first victory. Kael frowned. Defeat it. No. You said victory. I did. Orolith looked toward him. You freed something without destroying it. Kael realized that was the kind of strength he wanted. Echelon 5. Teji Lectars, after Seraphine showed Kael the letters she had written, he spent the night reading every one. Some were angry, some were hopeful, some were only a few sentences long. One re, if you are angry with me, you have the right. If you hate father, I understand. Please stay alive long enough to choose what you want your life to be. Kael folded it carefully. He had spent 10 years thinking no one cared. That belief had been wrong. Someone had cared. Someone had simply been too powerless to prove it. The realization changed his relationship with Seraphine. They could not recover the lost decade, but they could stop losing the future. SENE 6. T. Saldiarbuho Oki, one of the soldiers Kael freed, remained unconscious for several hours. When he finally woke, he asked where his commander was. Seraphine told him the truth. The soldier began crying. Thought I was protecting the kingdom. You were, Kael said. The soldier stared at him. Why did it feel so wrong? Because the people giving the orders were no longer protecting anyone. The soldier looked at the silver mark. You. Kael smiled. Still trying to figure that out. The soldier laughed. For a moment, everyone in the room was simply human. No armies. No bloodlines. That moment stayed with Kael throughout the war. Sesiene 7. The Fraid Rargo Oms, when Orolith called the ancient dragons from the Vale, some refused to join him. One dragon named Vera challenged him. Trust humans again. Orolith answered, no. The dragon seemed surprised. I want you to trust your own choice. Vera looked at Kael. And him? You choose whether to trust him. The dragon remained silent. Then it flew beside Orolith. It was not complete trust. It was the beginning of a decision. Kael realized the new world would not be built through commands. It would be built one decision at a time. SCNE 8, Serapinus Hice. Before the final confrontation, Seraphine stood alone beside the palace fountain. Her dragon Solon approached. The creature told her, yes, off dying. No. She looked toward Kael. I am afraid of surviving as the person I used to be. Solon touched her hand. Then choose again. Seraphine smiled. That was the moment she stopped fighting to preserve the Vera name. She began fighting to create a future worth carrying. Sani 9. The child Rus, the child Kael rescued after the first palace attack, later became the youngest apprentice at the new dragon sanctuary. His name was Thomas. He had been terrified of dragons before. After the war, he asked permission to touch one. The dragon lowered its head, placed a hand against its scales. It is warm, he whispered. Kael smiled. Thomas looked up. Why were we scared of them? Kael answered, people taught us to be. Thomas frowned. Can people teach us to be wrong? All the time. Thomas nodded seriously. Then we should learn to ask questions. Kale laughed. Yes, that was exactly what the new generation needed. Ce 10, the last clone farsag te first durigom before the skygrave vanished, Kale stood before the first dragon. Come back, he asked. The dragon shook its head. My era is finished. Kyle felt sadness. You sound relieved. I am. The dragon looked at him. Every age believes it must last forever. It does not. Oh, Kyle nodded. Should we protect? Choice. The answer was simple. It became the heart of everything Kale did afterward. Again 11. THECOI AFTR VC2RY months after the war, people began rebuilding. A former royal stable became a public dragon clinic. Palace archives were opened. Royal treasures were sold to fund villages destroyed during the crown's rule. Kale refused a private residence. He lived in a small house near the sanctuary. Seraphine teased him for choosing a place with a leaking roof. Cal replied that the roof was historically significant. She laughed. For the first time, their relationship included ordinary jokes. That mattered as much as the great battles. Sinning 12. The first IRDNOH, the council asked Kale to write the official Guardian Code. He rejected the first draft. It contained too many rules. He replaced it with 5 simple principles. Do not command what can choose. Do not fear what you have not understood. Protect the weak without making them dependent. Remember the cost of every victory, and never allow power to become more important than freedom. Seraphine read the list and smiled. That sounds like you. Kale shook his head. No, it sounds like everyone who taught me. SKN 13. The Rakardis of The Oldawarad Kiel spent months organizing historical documents from the destroyed palace. Some records revealed that entire wars had been staged to justify stronger dragon laws. Some kings had deliberately provoked dragon attacks to increase public fear. Kale preserved everything. He refused to rewrite history even when it embarrassed his family. People deserve the truth, he told the archivists. What if the truth makes them hate us? Then they can hate us for the right reasons. The archive became one of the most important institutions in the New Kingdom. Asim 14. Astra's first diplomatic journey lasted 3 weeks. She visited 5 human cities and 2 dragon sanctuaries. A crowd threw stones at her. A guard raised his weapon. Astra stopped him. They attacked you. I know. Why spare them? Astra looked at the crowd. Because I want the world to learn that I can choose. The crowd became silent. One person lowered their weapon. Then another. By sunset, the square was empty. Astra returned weeks later. The same people brought food. Peace had begun the only way it ever could. Someone chose differently. CN 15. Years passed. Children who had been born after the crown's fall grew up without seeing dragons in chains. That became normal. Perhaps that was the greatest victory. Kale sometimes stood on the mountain overlooking Veledria. He would watch dragons and people move through the same roads. He knew conflict would return someday. No kingdom stayed peaceful forever. No relationship avoided every misunderstanding. But the world had changed its question. The old world had asked, who controls the dragon? The new world asked, what does the dragon choose? Kale smiled whenever he heard it. He remembered the boy who had once stood before the sunstone with no flame. He remembered thinking that day was the end. It had only been the beginning. The last ember had never been a flame meant to burn the world. It was a light meant to show the way out of darkness. And as long as someone was willing to carry it, the age of chains could never return exactly as it had before. Kale turned toward the sanctuary, called from the sky. Astra answered. Children laughed below. He walked toward them. The story of the last ember continued, not because one man had saved the world, but because thousands of people and dragons had learned that freedom was something they could choose together. And that choice became their inheritance. And the morning after the crown shattered, Kale woke on the floor of the ruined palace. Sunlight entered through a hole in the ceiling. For several seconds, he did not know where he was. He heard wings. Lyra landed beside him. You are alive. Kale smiled. I was hoping for something more dramatic. She nudged him. Thank you. You're welcome. Kyle tried to stand and immediately fell back down. Lyra laughed. Outside, the city was waking. The streets were covered in ash, broken stone, and fallen banners. But people were already helping each other. Soldiers were carrying injured civilians. Shopkeepers were opening doors. Dragon handlers were treating wounded beasts. Kale had expected victory to feel triumphant. Instead, it felt quiet. Seraphine found him near noon. She sat beside him. We won. Kale nodded. Does it feel strange? Very. She looked around. Maybe that's because winning isn't the end. Kale smiled. It is the beginning. They sat together until sunset. No speeches. No celebration. Just two siblings watching a broken kingdom begin to rebuild. Sen 17. T. Derajan Omdu Ho Rafashatal Evi, Arleth announced that he would return to the Hollow Vale. Cal expected the decision. He did not expect to miss him immediately. You could stay, Kale said. Arleth shook his head. The mountains still need someone who remembers them. Kale laughed. That sounds like an excuse. It is an excellent excuse. Arleth lowered his head. You should not spend your entire life following me. Kale looked at him. You were the first person to believe I could become something? No. Arleth corrected him. You became something because you chose to. Kale smiled. Before leaving, Arleth gave him a single scale. It was silver and almost weightless. For? Nothing. Kale frowned. Then why? So you remember that some things do not need a purpose to have meaning. The dragon flew away. Kale watched until he disappeared over the mountains. He kept the scale beside his mother's ring. E18? THENWD Raigan Si Choal, the first Dragon Guardian School, opened 1 year after the war. It welcomed humans and dragons together. Training yard had been redesigned. There were no cages, no forced bonding circles, no chains. Children learned dragon history before learning combat. They studied languages so they could understand the creatures they hoped to protect. Kale visited the school often. One afternoon, a teacher asked him to speak to the students. He stood before 30 children and 5 young dragons. Is the strongest dragon? He asked. The students shouted different answers. The storm dragon. The ancient dragon. The Kale shook his head. The strongest dragon is the one you cannot control and choose to respect anyway. The children became quiet. A young girl raised her hand. Attacks us? Then defend yourself? What if it is stronger? Then run. The children laughed. Cal smiled. Brave does not mean fighting everything. It was one of the first lessons he wanted the next generation to learn. CNE 19, Tichivela H off Tiduflaes. A year later, Kale visited a village where humans and dragons had once fought for generations, had 2 flags. One belonged to the old human army. The other belonged to a dragon clan. The villagers had agreed to keep both. Kale asked why. The village elder answered, we don't want to erase what happened. What do you want? To remember without continuing the hatred. Kale admired the answer. The center of the village stood a memorial wall. Human names were written beside dragon names. Enemy and ally, victor and victim, all remembered together. Kale placed a silver flower on the wall. A dragon placed its head beside him. No words were needed. Tichini 20. T. Fenales saw many years later, Kale was asked what he feared most. He surprised everyone by saying, forget what? A historian asked. The feeling of being powerless. The historian expected another answer. Kale continued, I don't mean that I want people to remember pain forever. I mean, they should remember what pain taught them. He looked toward the mountains. When people become powerful, they forget what it was like when they had none. Then they create systems that hurt others. He touched the silver scale of Orolith. Power should make you more careful, not less. The historian wrote the words down. Years later, that sentence would appear in every Dragon Guardian school. It would become part of the oath. And when students asked who first said it, teachers would tell them about a boy whose flame did not burn. A boy who was sent away because his family thought he was useless. A boy who returned without a crown. A boy who discovered that the greatest power in the world was not control. It was choice. And somewhere high above the mountains, dragons continued to fly. And Biravidon. Fina Extadias in 21. The return to the Sunstone years after the war. The original Sunstone was moved from the ruined Vera estate to the new Guardian Hall. Many people wanted to destroy it because it reminded them of the old hierarchy. Kale disagreed. Let people see it, he said. Apprentice asked why. Because history becomes dangerous when we hide the things that embarrassed us. The apprentice touched the crystal. Kale smiled. Good. The apprentice looked confused. I thought the Sunstone was supposed to show power. It was never very good at that. Kale placed his own hand against it. For a moment, Crystal remained silent. Then a thin silver glow appeared. The room became quiet. Kale looked at the mark in the stone. It was not a ranking. It was not a measure of strength. It was simply proof that the past could be remembered without being obeyed. The apprentice smiled. Does that mean I'm strong? Kale shook his head. It means you are yourself. As CN22, Serapanis Leste Lesson Seraphine eventually retired from active guardian work, opened a small school near the Western Forest. Her students expected a legendary warrior. Instead, found a strict teacher who constantly told them not to fight. One student complained, "How can you teach dragon combat if you never let us attack?" Seraphine smiled. Because the hardest battle is deciding whether you need to fight at all. On her final day as head instructor, she gathered the students beside the forest. A wild dragon watched from a distant hill. "Do not chase it," she said. "Is beautiful. Wes, can we approach?" "No." The students looked disappointed. Seraphine laughed. Respect includes distance. That became the school's favorite lesson. When Seraphine returned home that evening, Kale was waiting. "You were a difficult teacher," he said. "You were a difficult brother." They laughed. For the first time, neither carried the weight of the old family name. They were simply siblings. Tuanaruzoaris by Ahoaisui Ilara was offered a ceremonial title by the council. She refused. "I don't need a human title." Kale asked why. "Because I already have a name." She looked toward the sky. "And a choice." Kale smiled. Lara had always been the quietest reminder that freedom was not something humans invented. Dragons had always understood it. Humans were simply learning to respect it. On the evening of the annual festival, Lara flew above the city and released a shower of silver light. Children cheered. Kale watched from below. He remembered the first time he saw her as a wounded creature hiding in the darkness. Thousands of people knew her name. As a friend. Asini 24. Tieshtir Passetti Owen 100 years later, children in Valedria still heard the story of Calvera, but storytellers rarely agreed on the details. Some said he could command every dragon in the world. Others said he could split mountains with a single sword strike. A few claimed he had become immortal. Teachers corrected them. The truth is better, they said. They told children about a frightened boy, a broken family, a hidden power, dragon who taught him patience. They told them about Seraphine, who learned that loyalty did not mean obedience. They told them about Lyra, proved that trust could be stronger than magic. They told them about Astra, who was born from a weapon but became a person. And finally, told them about the last ember. It was never a crown, never a throne, never a dragon king. It was a choice made again and again, a choice not to control, a choice not to hate, a choice to protect without owning. And whenever the lesson ended, teacher would ask the children one question. What is the strongest power? The children would answer together. Choice. Then they would run outside. Dragons would fly overhead. The sun would set over Valedria. And the old ember would continue to glow in every generation that remembered. Fio CNGC, THEMBR, and THEDAWN. On the final winter of Kale's life, he returned to the mountain where he had first entered the hollow vale. Lara was old by then, though still stronger than most dragons. Astra had become an ambassador. Seraphine had retired completely. The kingdom no longer needed Kale every day. That was exactly what he had hoped for. He climbed the same path where his family's carriage had abandoned him decades earlier. The trees had changed. The road was wider. A small sign stood near the entrance. Welcomito TGFR Idrejuensa NSTURY. Kyle laughed softly. He remembered when the entire valley had been forbidden. Now children visited it with their parents. He reached the cliff where he had once stood as a frightened 16-year-old boy. The moon rose. For a moment, he could almost hear his father's voice. "You have failed." Cale closed his eyes. The words no longer hurt. They belonged to another life. He removed his mother's silver ring and held it in the moonlight. "I kept it," he whispered. The wind answered. Behind him, footsteps approached. Cale turned. "Yes?" "The children are ready." "Ready for what?" "The story." Cale smiled. He followed the guardian back toward the sanctuary. Dozens of children sat around a small fire. Dragons rested nearby. Astra, now enormous, watched from the hillside. Cale sat beside the fire. One child raised a hand. "Is it true you had no dragon when you were young?" "Yes." "Were you scared?" "Yes." "Did you become brave later?" Cale thought about the question. The children looked confused. "I learned that being brave does not mean being unafraid. It means you keep choosing what is right while fear is still there." Another child asked, "Did you ever hate the people who hurt you?" Cale nodded. "Then, how did you stop?" "I realized hatred was a chain too." The children listened. Cale looked around the fire. "Some chains are made from iron. Others are made from anger. Both can keep you trapped." A young dragon moved closer to the children. No one screamed. No one reached for a weapon. The dragon simply rested its head beside the fire. Cale smiled. He thought about the old world, the noble houses, the crown, his father, his sister, Orolith, Lyra, Astra. Every pain had led here, not to a throne, not to revenge. To this ordinary night, a child sitting beside a dragon without fear, that was the victory. Not that Cale had become powerful. Not that his family had fallen. Not that the crown had been destroyed. The victory was that children who had never known chains no longer believed chains were normal. Cale looked toward the sky. The stars were bright. He smiled. The story was over, but the choice remained. And because the choice remained, the ember would never truly die. Final Rafla Ion. The Nam Techet Kejade, the historians eventually stopped calling Kyle Avera. They called him the last ember. Cale never corrected them. He no longer believed a family name could define a person. A name could open doors, close them, start wars, build empires, or create expectations, but a name could never decide what someone would do with the life they were given. That lesson was not easy. Cale had spent years trying to escape the name Vera, only to discover that escaping it completely was another form of allowing it to control him. So he did something different. He remembered it. He remembered the good. He remembered the cruelty. He remembered Seraphine. He remembered his mother. He remembered his father without pretending the past was better than it had been. He remembered the hollow veil and the night he first heard the ancient voice. He remembered the dragon who taught him that power without restraint became another prison. He remembered the crown and all the lives it destroyed. Most importantly, he remembered the people who had chosen differently. The guard who left him a knife. The boy who told him he was not worthless. The sister who kept writing letters. The dragon that brought him food. The creatures that trusted him after he had every reason to distrust them. The citizens who lowered their weapons. The children who learned that dragons were neighbors instead of monsters. Those memories became the real history, not the battles, not the titles, not the power levels. Choice after choice after choice. That was how the world changed. One person deciding not to repeat an old mistake. One dragon deciding not to answer fear with violence. One child deciding to ask a question before reaching for a weapon. One guardian deciding that protection did not mean ownership. And one boy who once stood before a crystal with no visible flame deciding that he was still worthy of a future. That boy became Kyle Vera. That man became the last ember. And the ember was never meant to burn forever. It was meant to be passed on. So when Cale finally closed his eyes for the last time, the fire did not disappear. Lyra carried it in memory. Seraphine carried it in her students. Astra carried it in every city she visited. The guardians carried it in their oath. And the children carried it without even knowing the name of the man who had begun it. Because that was the final truth Cale had learned. Strongest legacy was not being remembered. It was creating a world that no longer needed you. And so, long after the last ember was gone, The dragons continued to fly freely over Valedria. The kingdom continued to change. Humans made mistakes. Dragons made mistakes. They had learned to face those mistakes without building another crown. And every winter, when the first stars appeared above the mountains, the guardians lit a single small fire in the sanctuary. They called it the Ember Night. No king attended. No noble stood above anyone else. Humans and dragons sat together in a circle. They told stories. They laughed. They remembered. Then, before the fire went out, the youngest guardian would stand and say the old words, "Do not command what can choose." Everyone would answer, "Do not fear what you have not understood." The guardian would continue, "Protect without owning." The crowd would answer, "Remember the cost." And finally, together, humans and dragons would speak the last line, "Keep the ember alive." The fire would burn until dawn. Then it would be allowed to fade, because an ember did not need to burn forever to prove that it had mattered.